Montana Territory. Early spring of 1881, snow still clung to the hills like stubborn ghosts, but the sun had started to push through. The wind carried the sharp scent of thawing earth and pine. Down in the wide, open valley near the Musselshell River, a cowboy named Paxton Cade reined in his horse at the top of a low ridge and stared down at the small homestead below. He had not expected her. She was hauling water from the well with steady, practiced movements, her thin frame wrapped in a faded gray shawl. One bucket in each hand, arms trembling under the weight, her boots sinking into the soft mud. There was no one else in sight. Just her, a sagging barn and a crooked clothesline that danced in the breeze like it was trying to wave someone home. He had not seen her in 7 years. Clementine Oswell, Paxton muttered under his breath, heart kicking a little harder. He eased his weight back in the saddle, watching her make the slow, painful walk toward the house. She paused halfway, setting the buckets down, fingers flexing. Then she straightened, blew out a breath and picked them up again. He rode down without thinking. The hooves thudded soft in the thawed dirt and she looked up when he was nearly to the fence. Her face stilled. Green eyes, same as he remembered, sharp and steady but tired now. She did not smile. "Paxton," she said, voice hushed with disbelief. "You were supposed to be in Wyoming." He dismounted slowly. "Was until the herd got sold early. Thought I'd swing north, check on an old friend." "I ain't anyone's charity," she said, lifting the buckets again like she could pretend her arms were not shaking. Paxton stepped forward and took them both from her grasp. "You do not got to be strong all the time now, Clem." Her jaw clenched. "Do not call me that." He only nodded, carried the buckets up the porch and into the lean to where the washbasin sat. When he came back out, she was still standing in the yard, arms limp at her sides, like she did not know what to do with them now that they were empty. "You got anyone else here?" he asked. "No. Your folks, dead 3 winters ago, typhoid." Paxton looked toward the barn. "You got livestock?" "1 milk cow, chickens sometimes when the foxes do not get them. I trade cheese and eggs at the store in town, once a week. I can stay a few days, help mend the fence, see to the roof." She shook her head hard. "No. I do not need saving." "I did not come to save you," he said, voice low. "I came because I remembered a girl who once gave me a biscuit when I was freezing in a ditch. You remember that?" Clementine looked away. "I was 17. You were 16 and mean as a snake to most, but you fed me. You looked me in the eye and said, 'You do not get to die here. Go do something better.' I never forgot that. I do not need thanks. I am not giving it, I am offering help." She looked at him for a long moment, then finally nodded once. 3 days, no more," he smiled. "Fair enough." That night they ate cold beans and cornbread in silence. Her kitchen was small, clean, and worn thin like everything else. A single oil lamp lit the room. She moved quiet, efficient, but her hands trembled when she reached for the plates. "Let me," he said, taking over. I know you can. That is not the point." She sat back down, arms folded tight across her chest. "You always had a way of saying things like they were simple. They are, sometimes." He slept in the barn, rolled up in his bedroll beside the old milk cow. The wind howled through the rafters, but he felt warmer than he had in weeks. In the morning he chopped wood, fixed 2 fence posts and re-hung the chicken wire. Clementine watched from the porch, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "You always this quiet?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "I talk when there's something worth saying." "And how long has it been since someone helped you?" She hesitated. "Since before the war, maybe. Pa left for the Union Army in '64, never came back. I was 11. After that it was just Ma and me." Paxton nodded. "You were the strongest girl I ever knew." "I did not want to be." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat off his skin. "You do not have to be now." That night she cooked potatoes and salt pork. They sat closer this time, both of them tired but less guarded. He told her about the trail dust storms, near stampedes, the men he rode with. She listened, really listened. And when a soft knock came at the back door just past dark, everything shifted. Clementine opened it and 2 children came in. A boy and a girl, thin, dirty, no older than 7 or 8. The girl clung to Clementine's leg wordlessly. Paxton stood. "Clem," she turned toward him, her voice quiet. "Their mother was my cousin. She passed last year. These 2 showed up 3 weeks ago. I did not have the heart to turn them away." The boy stepped forward. "She said we could stay if we worked." Clementine knelt and brushed his hair back. "You do not have to work tonight, just go wash up. Your blankets are by the stove." When they were gone, Paxton looked at her. "You never said, you did not ask." He studied her. "You are doing this all by yourself." She lifted her chin. "They need me." He stepped forward again. "And who takes care of you?" Her breath caught. He reached out, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "Let me stay longer. I can help. I want to." She looked up at him, eyes wet but not crying. "I do not know how to. Let someone in." "You already did," he said. She leaned into his hand for the briefest second before pulling away. 3 more days. He nodded. 3 more days. But they both knew it would not end there. The next morning brought a low-hanging fog that clung to the ground like it was reluctant to leave. It muffled sound and softened the edges of the trees behind the barn. Paxton rose early, body aching in the usual places from too many nights on the trail and too many years without a real roof. He rubbed his hands together to warm them, then stepped outside where the frost still touched the corners of the porch rail. Inside, the girl sat cross-legged on the floor beside the stove, braiding a length of twine with careful fingers. The boy was nowhere in sight. Clementine stood at the table, mending the frayed cuff of a shirt with even stitches, her hair pulled back in a low knot. She didn't look up when Paxton stepped through the door. "He's out back feeding the chickens," she said, threading her needle through again. Paxton nodded. "He do that every morning, just started yesterday. Said he wanted to earn his keep." He crossed to the stove and poured himself a cup from the dented tin kettle. The coffee was thin but hot. He drank in silence, watching her hands move precise, steady. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms marked by old burns and sun-darkened skin. "Did they travel far?" he asked. "From Miles City. Took him over a week, best I can guess." She tied off the thread and bit it clean. "They walked most of it." He shook his head. "That's near 80 miles. They didn't know better," she said. "They just kept going." She folded the shirt and set it aside. Paxton looked down at his cup, then back up. "You ever think of sending them to someone else? Someone with more hands?" She leaned her hip against the table. "Only family left is a cousin in Kansas with too many mouths already. I wrote, but the answer came back plain, 'God be with you.' That was all it said." He set the tin cup down and crossed to the door. "I'll check the south fence today. I saw some warping yesterday." She nodded once. "There's a coil of wire in the lean-to. You'll need the short-handled hammer. Head's loose on the long one." Outside, the fog had begun to lift, revealing the gentle rise of the pasture and the slow curve of the creek beyond it. Paxton found the boy kneeling beside the coop, sprinkling feed with careful handfuls. "You got a name?" Paxton asked. The boy didn't look up. "Jude." "You do good work, Jude." The boy's narrow shoulders lifted a little. "I like the chickens. They don't talk much." Paxton knelt beside him, studying the boy's face. His cheeks were hollow, but his eyes were alert. "That one there's got a limp, you notice?" The boy nodded. "Right foot. She got caught on the wire 3 days ago. You fix it." Tied a bit of cloth over the cut. Clementine showed me how. Paxton stood again. She teach you to mend too? I asked. She said if I'm gonna stay, I gotta learn everything. He smiled just a little. Smart woman. Jude looked up finally. Is she your wife? No, Paxton said carefully. But I aim to stay a while. The boy nodded slowly, then turned back to his feed. By mid-afternoon, Paxton had replaced the warped slats and reinforced the corner post with rock and fresh nails. His hands were raw when he returned, but the sun had come out fully, warming the yard and drying the mud into hard crusts beneath his boots. He found Clementine kneeling in the garden bed behind the house, loosening the soil with a rusted fork. "You planting already?" he asked. "Peas and onions." "They'll hold if we don't get another freeze." He crouched beside her. "You mind if I ask something?" She kept her gaze on the dirt. "You're going to anyway. You ever think about leaving this place?" Clementine stopped digging. "And go where?" "Anywhere you don't have to carry all of it alone." She wiped her hands on her skirt. "This land's paid for. My father died working it. My mother buried him under that cottonwood. I don't leave my dead behind." Paxton looked toward the tree, its bare branches curling upward like reaching fingers. "You ever think maybe they'd want you living, not just surviving?" She pressed her palm into the dirt. "I don't know how to do anything else." He reached out and covered her hand with his. "You could learn." She didn't pull away. Her fingers stayed beneath his, warm and still. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about what it'd mean having someone here who stays." Paxton's voice was low. "And what have you come up with?" "I'm not sure yet." "That's fair." She pulled her hand back and brushed it on her skirt again, but something in her face had shifted, less guarded, more uncertain in a way that hinted at hope. That evening, as dusk settled and the children lay curled on the braided rug near the stove, Paxton sat beside Clementine on the porch steps. The stars had begun to blink awake overhead. She passed him a mug of warm milk steeped with dried mint. "I used to sit out here with my mother," she said. "She'd count the stars out loud and tell me they were holes poked in heaven's floor so the light wouldn't get lost." Paxton leaned back against the post. "She sounds like someone worth remembering." She was. They sat in silence for a long while. A coyote cried in the distance. Clementine's voice came again, quieter this time. "I don't want to be alone anymore." "You're not," he said. She turned her head, eyes steady on his. "I know." And that was all either of them said before the door creaked open and the girl stepped out barefoot, blanket around her shoulders. Clementine opened her arms and the child climbed into her lap without a word. Paxton watched as Clementine held her close, the girl's head tucked beneath her chin. He didn't speak again that night. He didn't need to. On the fourth day, the wind shifted. It came down from the Judith Mountains, dry and restless, stirring dust from the fields and rattling the loose boards along the barn's north wall. Paxton repaired what he could before the sun reached its peak, then rested under the lean shadow of the hayloft, sharpening the blade of Clementine's cornsicle with a whetstone he'd found rusting in a drawer. Inside the house, Clementine was kneeling beside a wooden trunk with the girl. Her name was Mabel. He'd learned sorting through bolts of cloth and a tin of bent sewing needles. Mabel held up a piece of blue calico, her eyes bright. "It was my mother's," Clementine said when Paxton stepped in. "She used to sew by lamplight, even when her hands ached too bad to hold a spoon at supper. She'd teach you, enough to keep us dressed." She folded the fabric carefully and handed it to Mabel. "Pick a pattern you like. We'll make something for spring." The girl nodded and slipped out the door, the cloth bundled in her arms. Paxton watched her go. "She's warming to you. She don't speak much, but she listens, watches everything." "You always been like that too?" Clementine didn't answer right away. She returned the rest of the fabric to the trunk and closed the lid with both hands. "When you don't have power, You learn to notice what others miss. Silence tells more than noise ever will. He crossed the room and knelt beside the trunk. You've been thinking about what comes next. I think about it every time the roof leaks or the hens go missing. But that's not what you mean. No, she looked at him directly. You're not just passing through anymore. No, he said again. I've grown used to deciding things alone. If I let you stay, it's not just for mending fences or hauling wood. I understand that. She exhaled through her nose, slow and deliberate. Then let's speak plain. What is it you want, Paxton? He rubbed his thumb along the edge of his jaw. A place to belong. A reason to stop looking over my shoulder. Someone to build with, not just ride away from. She studied him, not blinking. And you think that's here? I know it is. She rose to her feet. Then you'll need to speak with Jude. He's not a boy who trusts easy. I've noticed. She wiped her palms on her skirt. He's been through worse than he'll tell. Sleeps with one eye open, flinches if someone raises their voice. Paxton nodded. I won't push him. Later, he found Jude behind the barn, stacking stones into a small wall along the edge of the garden. His hands were scraped from the work, but he didn't stop when Paxton approached. Mind if I give you a hand? Jude shrugged, then scooted over to make room. Together, they placed stones in silence for a while. I heard you once tried to trap a fox with just a bucket and a rope, Paxton said eventually. Jude glanced sideways. Didn't work. Still, that takes grit. Most boys would have just chased it off. The chickens were hers. She cried when she found them torn up. I wanted to fix it. That's more than most men your age would have done. Jude set a flat stone in place, more forcefully than necessary. Are you staying? I'd like to. Why? Paxton looked out toward the tree line. Because I see something worth staying for. The boy didn't answer. He picked up another stone and held it in both hands, weighing it before placing it gently next to the others. As twilight stretched across the yard, Paxton returned to the house and found Clementine at the stove, stirring something that smelled of salt and iron. Jude say much? She asked. He listens more than he speaks. Good. That's where trust starts. Mabel was humming softly from her corner, sewing the blue calico into a crooked row of stitches. Paxton crouched beside her and watched for a moment. You did each of those yourself, she nodded. Looks like it'll hold, he said. Her smile was small, but it stayed. That night, after the children were asleep, Clementine stepped outside. Paxton followed her, boots crunching softly in the frost-dusted grass. Do you remember, she said, not turning, that winter you showed up at our door with a busted lip and no coat? I remember. You were too proud to ask for help, but you couldn't stand up straight. I thought if I said the wrong thing, you'd send me off. I almost did. What changed your mind? She looked at him over her shoulder. You thanked me like it cost you something. I meant it. I know you did. He stepped closer, wind brushing the hair from her cheek. Clementine, she faced him, steady as ever. I won't promise easy days. I don't want easy, I want true. Her breath caught just once. He reached for her hand, slow, letting her pull away if she chose. She didn't. Their fingers laced together, rough palm against rough palm, and the silence between them was full of understanding. You'll need a coat, she said, voice low. Spring's still a ways off. I've got one now, he said, drawing her hand to his chest. Right here. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. You better be sure. I've never been surer. Behind them, the lamp in the window flickered once, then steadied. The creek behind the pasture had risen with the melt, running fast over rock and root, its sound a constant hush beneath the wind. Paxton stood at its edge just after dawn, boots sinking into the damp earth as he watched the current carry away broken twigs and flecks of old snow. He held a small bundle under one arm, a length of pine, smoothed and carved, wrapped in oiled cloth. He returned to the house as Clementine was kneading dough at the table, sleeves rolled high and hair damp from washing. She didn't speak when he came in, but her eyes flicked to the parcel in his hand and then back to the dough. "Made something," he said. "For the boy." She didn't stop kneading. "He doesn't take to gifts. It's not a gift. It's a tool." She dusted flour from her knuckles. "What kind?" "He's been building that stone wall. Thought he could use a proper trowel." He unwrapped the cloth, revealing the polished handle and narrow blade, shaped from a broken horseshoe and honed with care. "Made it from scrap." Balanced it for a smaller hand. She reached out and turned it in her fingers, testing the weight. "He'll know you spent time on it. That's the point." She set it down gently, not looking at him yet. "You're not just staying. You're settling." "I reckon I am." She wiped her hands clean on a rag and nodded once. "He's behind the barn." Paxton found Jude crouched beside the stone line again, sleeves rolled, palms dirty, eyes focused. When Paxton approached, the boy didn't look up. "Been thinking," Paxton said. "You could use something better than your hands." He knelt and placed the trowel beside him without ceremony. Jude glanced down, then picked it up, turning it in his grip. "I had one like it years back," Paxton said. "Lost it in a river crossing. Figured it was time to make another." Jude ran his thumb along the handle. "Why me?" "Because you're building something. Thought you should have the right tool." The boy nodded once, then returned to his work without a word. Paxton didn't press. He sat beside him, stacking stones in silence. By late morning, Clementine was in the root cellar, sorting through jars of preserved apples and pickled beans, while Mabel sat on the step above, humming a song under her breath. Paxton crouched to help, lifting crates and checking for spoil. "You've got enough to last another month," he said, setting aside a jar with a cracked seal. "I'll need to trade flour for sugar next trip into town, and we're low on lye." "I'll ride in," he offered. "You can stay here." She looked up, one hand resting on the shelf. "You trust yourself with the store prices in Melstone. I've been cheated enough to spot it now." She pulled a jar from the back and set it beside another. "Then take the mule. He's slower, but you won't get stuck if the trail softens." He nodded and straightened. "I'll leave after supper. Be back by tomorrow night." She stood too, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You'll take the list. I'll take the list." After supper, Paxton packed a small satchel and slung it over his shoulder. Clementine met him at the porch, arms folded tight against the chill. "You sure you'll be all right?" he asked. She nodded. "We've done without before." He stepped close, lowering his voice. "But you don't have to now." She looked at the ground. "That's still new." He reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. "Doesn't have to stay that way." She didn't pull free. "I'll keep the lamp lit." He rode out beneath a waxing moon, the mule's hooves steady on the hard, packed trail. The wind had quieted and the sky stretched wide above him, stars like scattered seeds across a black field. When he returned the next evening, Clementine was waiting by the fence, shawl pulled tight, cheeks pink from the cold. The children were inside, their shadows moving behind the curtain. "You're late," she said. "Only by a little." She took the reins, leading the mule toward the barn. "Didn't think you'd come back so quick." "I said I would." She glanced at him, then away. "Old habits." He reached out, brushing a fleck of straw from her collar. "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer, but she leaned into his side as they walked. Inside, the children were quiet, eyes flicking up from their sewing and slate work. Paxton handed Mabel a paper parcel. "Licorice drops," he said. "Only a few, don't spoil your teeth." She took them with both hands, her face soft with surprise. Jude didn't speak, but he nodded once, then returned to his slate. Later, once the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Clementine stood at the window, watching the dark settle over the land. Paxton came up behind her, resting a hand on the sill beside hers. "I saw a man in town," he said. "Mentioned a contract for freight hauling west of here. Said they need reliable hands come June. You thinking of taking it?" "I was thinking we could take it. Get ahead before winter." She turned to face him. "That's not just a job, that's a plan." He met her gaze. "It's a start." She reached up slowly, fingers brushing the edge of his collar. "You ever think maybe this is what it looks like, building something that holds? Every day I'm here." She drew closer, her breath warm against his neck. "Then we'll find a way." "I already did," he whispered, and kissed her soft and sure, like he meant to stay in that moment for the rest of his life. And she let him. The days turned warmer. Snow pulled back into the mountains and the ground softened enough for planting. Clementine stood at the edge of the garden with her sleeves pushed to the elbows and her skirt pinned at the corners, watching Paxton drive the spade into the thawed soil. Each push of the blade turned up dark earth, rich and damp, ready to take seed. Mabel sat on a low stool nearby, stringing beans from last year's store into neat rows for drying. Her quiet hum carried faintly on the breeze. Jude hauled a bucket from the well, muscles taut with effort but steady. He'd grown visibly stronger in just weeks, his shoulders broader, his steps no longer tentative. "Your rows are crooked," Clementine said, not unkindly, nodding at Paxton's work. He leaned on the handle and squinted at the line. "Not crooked. Just got character." She stepped down into the furrow and adjusted his path with the toe of her boot. "Plants don't grow well in character. They need order." He grinned at her tone, but said nothing. She liked that about him, that he didn't fill silence just to fill it. When he handed her the hoe, their fingers brushed and she didn't pull away. That afternoon, Jude asked if he could ride into town with Paxton to help with trade. Clementine hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron, then nodded. "You'll mind your tone," she said. "I will," Jude replied, already pulling on his boots. "You'll speak plain if someone asks your name." "Yes, and you'll stay close." Paxton tipped his hat. "I won't let him out of my sight." She watched them ride out, Jude high on the mule, Paxton steady beside him on the paint horse. Mabel stood by the well, watching until they disappeared behind the ridge. Inside, Clementine settled into the rocker with her mending at her feet. Mabel climbed into the chair beside her without speaking, resting her head against Clementine's side. The house was quiet, the walls holding warmth from the fire, and for the first time in a long while, Clementine let herself feel something close to peace. That night, after the trade was done and the mules' packs were full of salt, flour, and a new bar of soap, Paxton and Jude stopped by the carpenter's shop on the edge of town. The man there was old, stooped, and mostly deaf, but he handed Paxton the small bundle wrapped in cotton cloth with a nod. Jude waited until they were well down the trail before he asked, "What is it?" "You'll see." They arrived home just after dusk. Mabel ran out to greet them, arms bare and feet dusty. Paxton handed her the sack of flour, and she carried it inside with both arms wrapped tight around it. Later, once supper was cleared and the children were tucked into their quilts, Paxton stepped outside with Clementine. The stars were sharp overhead and the cottonwood creaked gently in the wind. He held out the bundle. "Made something for you." She gave him a sideways glance. "Another tool." "Not quite." She unwrapped the cloth slowly, revealing a wooden box with dovetail corners and a hinged lid. Inside, nestled in a lining of linen, lay a small carving of a bird in flight. The wings were outstretched, the grain of the wood catching the starlight. Along the inside of the lid, burned into the wood, was a single line in careful script. "You are not alone anymore." She ran her fingers along the edge, then closed the box gently and held it to her chest. He waited. "You're sure this is what you want?" she asked. "I've never wanted anything more." I've got land, 2 children that aren't mine, and a house that needs a new roof before summer's out. I've got hands and I've got heart. That's enough." She looked at him then, really looked. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar above his brow, the way he stood just close enough for her to feel the heat of him without crowding her. "I was afraid," she said softly. "I know. But I'm not anymore." He took her hand, kissed the back of her fingers. "Then come with me." She stepped forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. "I already have." They married in June beneath the cottonwood, with Mabel holding a bouquet of wildflowers and Jude standing silent but proud beside Paxton. The preacher from town brought a Bible and a small loaf of bread, and afterward they ate on the porch while the sun dipped low behind the hills. The neighbors from 3 homesteads over came with preserves and smoked meat. The carpenter sent a cradle he'd built from old pine. Clementine wore her mother's shawl, and her eyes never left Paxton's face. They built a room on the back of the house for the children, and Paxton leveled the barn floor by hand. He took hauling contracts through the summer, but never more than 2 days gone. Every time he returned, Mabel ran to him first, arms wide. Jude helped plant corn and built a second stone wall just because he could. He asked Paxton to show him how to track mule prints through dry grass, and Paxton did, with patience and pride. By winter, the roof was whole, the larder full, and laughter came easy in the evenings. One night, with frost on the windows and the fire burning low, Clementine sat beside Paxton, her hand resting on his knee. Mabel slept curled in the cradle by the hearth, too old for it now but unwilling to leave it just yet. Jude was folded in a quilt on the floor, a book open on his chest. Clementine looked at Paxton, her voice no louder than the flames. "You think we'll hold?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "We already are." And they did, through lean seasons and long summers, through small sorrows and quiet joys, through years that passed slow and tender. They remained 2 people who had come to each other not searching for rescue but for rest, and found something better, a home, a family, a love that endured without needing to be spoken, only shown, always.